Mortis Media. Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be heading down into the basement for a truly chilling collection of scary stories. Don't forget, if you'd like your birthday shout out, or just to support me and show a little love, feel free to check out my Patreon page for some exclusive perks. Link in the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This experience happened last night when I had to go check on our rental property an hour away. My wife got a notification at around 10 p.m. that there was movement detected from the cameras we had set up in the rental property to keep an eye on the place until we can get it rented. My wife asked if I could go over there to make sure everything was okay and locked up. I told her to text me if any more notifications came through. I pull up around 11:30 and can see there's a light coming from the basement. Already on edge, I walk around the outside and check windows and doors. All are shut and locked. My wife called me and asked if I'd gone inside yet, because she got another movement detected in one of the bedrooms. I told her I was just unlocking the door and to go check inside, but really didn't want to. Maybe the camera detected me outside the window. I just said, "This is to make myself feel better." I open the door and yell out, "Is anyone in here?" I already called the police and they'll be arriving shortly. I listened for anyone moving around, but didn't hear anything. I check all the rooms and find nothing. So I head down to the basement to at least turn off the light. I walk into the basement and see the cord for the light swinging, but only that light. There's no air movement. I do a quick search and check for anyone hiding before I turn the light on my phone and pulled the cord. The moment it turns off, I heard a loud bang upstairs. I ran up the stairs to get out of the basement quickly. The basement stairs are right next to the front door. I go out the door and start shutting it. I hear a voice come from the basement. "I don't like the dark. Please stay." I hopped back in my vehicle and turned it on and pulled out the driveway, and I see the basement turn back on. I called my wife and told her that I was on my way home. She said she got another movement detected alert right as I called her maximum nope. So there I was at 21 years old, upright and breathing, not drunk, not high, and not sleep deprived. I'm not the type to go chasing ghosts or shadows, and I believe in any of that nonsense. But then it happened. At roughly 11 p.m., 2 years back, night had already curled up around the window. I'd gone downstairs to pee, and the basement was unremarkable. Post to the right wall, to the left, couch in the middle. To get to the washroom, you had to loop behind the couch, and halfway through the journey, something in my brain went ping. That subtle instinct, the one that doesn't speak in words but still gets its point across. Turn around now, and against all logic, I obeyed, and I saw it. A figure human-shaped, made entirely of light. Not glowing, not blazing, not radiant like some celestial being come to grant me the secrets of the universe. This thing was calm and pale, soft as fog, but dense enough that I couldn't see through it. It stood there behind the couch, silently waiting, watching me, and it shouldn't have been there. We looked into each other for a few seconds, but I didn't panic. My heart didn't leap into my throat, and there was no rush of terror, just astonishment. And then it ran. It sprinted behind the post, like someone who had absolutely not intended to be caught, whatever it was doing, and as soon as it passed the post, it was gone. That's when the feeling hit me. That ice cold. What the hell was that? That crawls up your spine when your brain finally catches up with your eyes. I hadn't been dreaming. I hadn't been drunk. The house was new. No previous owners. No lingering tragedy soaked into the drywall. No dead relatives. No anything. It wasn't until it vanished that I realized how heavy the air had become. It didn't look scary. No face, no claws. No love, crafty and writhing. Just a figure made of light. And as soon as I saw it, it startled and fled. and now I wonder what it saw in me. What made it pause and stare before bolting. The thing that makes this so scary isn't the thing itself, but the questions it leaves you once it disappears about the nature of reality, life after death, and much more. And I wish I had some answers for all the questions it left me so abruptly. 2 months ago, I moved into an old house, with 4 roommates, who I've been friends with for 6 years. We don't know the year that the house was built, but it has milk doors for the milkman to drop milk off at the house, when it was socially unacceptable for a housewife to interact with another man, aka the milkman. So we estimate that the house was built somewhere between 1920 and 1940, 1950, but it might be earlier. 2 days ago, I asked one of my roommates to send me the floor plan of the house. I noticed that there was a 17 square meter storage room in the basement, and that the only door to the storage room was through the boiler room. I had never been in the boiler room, only peeked inside. So I decided to check out this storage room. When I walked in, it was really dark. So I left to grab a flashlight. Unfortunately, the only flashlight I have is a dual flashlight laser pointer for my cats. So the flashlight was very small in diameter and quite dim, but I could tell the floors were made of concrete that was very eroded, and the walls were also made of some kind of rock material, either concrete or large bricks. The room itself was completely empty, and there were no lights and windows. When I shined the light at the furthest wall, about 5 meters away from where I was standing, I saw some wooden art thing hanging on the wall. I can't remember quite what it looked like, but I believed it was square-shaped, containing some geometric pattern. And I vaguely remember something unique, like a figure or larger symbol, to be somewhat in the center of this art-like thing, or maybe slightly higher than the center. At this point, I was somewhat freaked out, so I immediately decided to leave. And when I stepped through the door frame into the boiler room, I stepped in a puddle. I was somewhat confused, because it would have been very difficult to miss before I had walked through that area 3 times already. But the leak seemed to be coming from the hot water heater. So I decided it was normal and went to bed. Then last night when I was sleeping, I heard a bubbling sound coming from the toilet in the bathroom that is right next to my bedroom, which is the only bedroom in the basement. I got out of bed to check it out and saw this large bubbling forming and popping over and over again. For about 3 minutes I stood there and observed it, not knowing what to do. And when it finally stopped, I returned to bed. The house is old, so I assumed the bubbling in the toilet might have been a quirk of the house that I was experiencing for the first time, or maybe a blocked pipe. We've informed the landlord to check it out. This morning I messaged my roommates and told them I wanted to show them something in the evening, the storage room, but told them I wanted it to be a surprise so they could be as shocked as I was. Due to Thanksgiving weekend, as I live in Canada, only one roommate was going to be home. Rebecca, she texted me to ask what I wanted to show them and if it was a secret room. And after I said yes, Rebecca shared that Danny, another roommate, had recently had a dream about finding a secret room in our house. Rebecca also asked if the secret room was in the boiler room. I said it was. And she told me that Danny and Macy, a third roommate, had tried opening the door on 3 separate occasions in combination with each other, and they had never been able to open it. They assume it was locked because the door handle didn't turn, and they didn't care enough to ask the landlord for a key. I didn't expect the doorknob on the inside of the storage room when I was there briefly, but it has a keyhole on the side of the boiler room. I asked the landlord for the key to the storage room, but they said that they'd never had a key or been in that room, as they are the new owners of the home. I FaceTimed Rebecca and asked her to try opening the storage room, because I wasn't home yet. When she tried, the doorknob wouldn't turn. She also tried pushing and pulling, but the doorknob wouldn't budge at all. Rebecca had to leave to go to her family for Thanksgiving. So when I got home a few hours later, I tried going into the room. The puddle in front of the door was no longer there, but there was a puddle still under the hot water heater. Not just right in front of the door to the storage area. So I'm assuming that the water in front of the door dried over the past few days. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the door to open. The handle wouldn't turn, and the door wouldn't budge. Even when I pushed or pulled as hard as I could, I did not purposefully lock the door when I closed it 2 nights ago. And the first time I opened the door, it was so easy to open, I didn't even consider the door could be locked. And I know this is a very, very minor thing, and it might be unrelated. But 3 weeks ago, I accidentally spilled some liquid on the egg carton in the fridge. The carton was saturated with liquid. I assumed eventually it would dry, but I quickly realized I'd be wrong about that. I decided to just leave it. And today when I opened the fridge, the cotton was bone dry. I open my fridge every day, and I strongly believe I would have noticed if the egg carton started to dry after 3 weeks. With the water in the front of the door drying, I can chalk it up to natural drying. But with the egg carton, I can also see how that may have been the natural drying process. But I do find it quite strange that for 3 weeks the carton remained soaked and now was bone dry. With the toilet bubbling, I can say it's likely due to a blocked pipe or a quirk of the house. But why was I the only one able to open the door? And why can't it be open now? I suppose I could have accidentally locked the door on my way out, but my roommates insist they tried very hard to open it before I even knew about it. I've known these people for 6 years, and they aren't the kind of people to play pranks on others. I've never heard of them playing a prank on anyone, and they've never played a prank on me for the 6 years. I've known them. I can't come up with a reasonable explanation for why I was able to open a door, and my roommates, who tried on 3 separate occasions, insisted it was locked, and any insight into the other strange events would be greatly appreciated. N.A. I am sharing this because I'm in search of potential aid. I live in an above-ground basement in a 3-story townhouse. For some context, I'm a very light sleeper and pretty much wake up in almost any disturbance. To help alleviate this, I typically place some sort of white noise, whether it be artificial or something like a fan to help drown out any odd bumps in the night while I'm sleeping. I've been living in this place for over a year now, and aside from the occasional sounds from my roommates waking up early or an odd nightmare, I have generally slept here without any issue. That was until last night, at least. I had gone to bed around midnight, which is typical of me. Since I'm a night owl at heart, I was sleeping soundly, when suddenly I was awoken by something. I began to sit up in my sleepy state to try to more clearly understand the sound that I had just heard when it repeated itself a second time. It was an incoherent whisper that I heard clear as day, coming just a mere 4 feet from my left. From the closed window, I started to immediately feel panicked, but thinking maybe I was just in a weird state of half asleep. So I tried my best to wake myself up. More, stay attentive and listen. If the sound occurred more, I heard it again 3 more times, in the exact same cadence, volume, and location. Now I was truly freaked out, because I knew I was fully awake. My mind went into panic mode as I quickly got a makeshift weapon and some pepper spray, as my mind tossed around the ideas of potential intruders, or perhaps some sort of spirit. Which, mind you, my encounters with the supernatural have been minimal. At best, I've never witnessed anything to this level in my life. Now you may be thinking, if you hear a voice coming from your window, then wouldn't it make sense for it to be someone outside? I would wholeheartedly agree, except that this whisper did not at all have the sound of being muffled by someone trying to talk through a window. It sounded clear and airy, as if someone were right next to my window, talking at me from inside my room. Disturbed, tired, and feeling exposed, I decided to head up to the main level of the house to keep watch and be out of potential reach for whatever was scoping out or was in the basement. I waited in complete silence for about 40 minutes, just starting to subtly convince myself that maybe it was all just a ruse or a trick of the mind, when a set of repetitive, intentional knocks came at one of the glass windows. It knocked 6 times. A light knock that wasn't rhythmic in the slightest. This was the last of the activities I encountered. Not too long after this, one of my roommates came downstairs for a late-night drink of water, and we ended up searching through the property both inside and out, and checking the porch together to see if we saw any traces of anything. But all was clear. My question to you is, has anyone here experienced anything like this? Not at all sleep paralysis, but noticeable whispers or knocking. If so, do you have any suggestions to what I can do? I will say it's entirely plausible. This could have been a person, but I didn't hear any footsteps on the porch or up my bedside window, which can be hard to cover up unless someone was trying to be exceptionally sneaky. When I started my first year of grad in a school, I moved into a basement suite in an old Victorian house on the edge of town. The landlady was a kind woman in her 70s, soft-spoken and a bit eccentric, but always respectful. She lived alone in the main house upstairs. The rent was cheap, and I was only a 10-minute bike ride from campus. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. But from the moment I moved in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with the place. The basement had been converted into a separate living unit long ago, and though it was furnished decently and had its own entrance, the entire floor always felt damp and too still, like it was holding its breath. The air was heavy, and certain corners stayed unnaturally dark, no matter how many lamps I brought in. There were no windows, only narrow grates along the ceiling that were high and impossible to see through. The only connection between the main house and the basement was a locked stairwell behind a heavy door in the laundry room. The landlord never to unlock it, unless she knocked first and called down. That was the rule. About 2 weeks in, I was woken up by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. The lights were off and the room was soaked in pitch darkness. I looked at the clock. It read 2:15 a.m., expecting to hear the upstairs door open and her voice call my name. I listened, but there was no knock and no call. Just these steps descending the wooden stairs and the way they were walking. It was like someone was unfamiliar with how loud they were being, or maybe they just didn't care. I waited for the sound of keys or the door handle to turn, but nothing came. Just the footsteps and then silence. And then the floorboards just outside my bedroom creaked. At first, it was just a groan, then 2, then a shift, like a weight being adjusted. I didn't move. I could barely breathe. My door was locked. I always locked it before bed, but I suddenly didn't trust that was enough. I was too afraid to reach for my phone, so I pulled the blanket over my head like a child, heart hammering so hard it made my temples throb. Then, with terrifying slowness, the door knob began to turn. It rattled softly once, and then again. Testing, I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my hands to my ears, like I could muffle reality. I felt like a rabbit pinned under a hawk's shadow, completely helpless. Then silence. I stayed that way under the covers until dawn, and I never heard the steps go back up. When the morning sun finally crept through the high gray windows, I emerged, shivering and exhausted. The door was still locked. Nothing had been moved, but the sense of wrongness hung thick in the air. I told myself it had been a dream. It had to be. But I never slept comfortably there again. I stayed there for 2 years, always too busy or too broke to move. I stacked furniture in front of the stairwell door most nights and kept a flashlight and kitchen knife under my pillow. I learned to function on about 4 hours of shallow sleep and a few cups of bitter coffee. The night of my graduation, I booked a hotel downtown. My parents couldn't fit in the apartment anyway, and I didn't want them anywhere near that place. That night in the hotel, I slept like the dead. It was bliss. It wasn't until many years later, in fact, that I dared ask the new tenant what they thought of the place. They paused and said, "You mean the stairs?" And that's all they would say. A few years ago, my wife and I rented this 2-story house with a basement on the outskirts of town. It looked normal enough from the outside. Nothing about it screamed haunted. The neighborhood was quiet, sleepy even. But from the moment we moved in, something about the house felt wrong. It was subtle at first, almost like a shadow, lurking just beyond the edges of sight. One of the first strange things we noticed was a sound we could never explain. Every single morning without fail, at exactly 8:30 a.m., heavy footsteps would echo from the second floor, slowly descending down the creaky wooden stairs into the basement. No one was ever around. No guests, no neighbors, no pets. Just these slow, deliberate footsteps descending into the depths below. We'd listen frozen in place, wondering who or what was walking those stairs. It didn't take long before we started exploring the basement more thoroughly, desperate for answers. That's when we found it a hidden room. The door was old, almost invisible behind some hanging sheets of plywood, like it had been deliberately concealed. When we pushed it open for the first time, the air inside was cold and thick. I remember my wife's phone suddenly cracking to life in her hand, and static blasted from the speakers at an ear-piercing volume with no apparent source, then cutting off as suddenly as it had started. We exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. The night before our wedding, a close friend of mine came over to hang out. We smoked some spiced synthetic weed or so. We thought that stuff was a nightmare. Unlucky to be alive. But he started telling me about a ghost that had been following him around the house, whispering for him to leave. He said it left scratch marks on his arm, deep gouges, and I laughed it off at first, chalking it up to the paranoia or the weed. But then things got serious. Later that same night, around midnight, we heard a sharp knock on the balcony on the second floor. Both of us froze, hearts pounding, and we crept upstairs and looked out into the darkness. There, pacing slowly, was a figure, human shape but not human. It felt like a faint shimmer of electric energy, wrapped in a barely visible form. Like one of those plasma lighting globe toys you can buy at Spencer's, but far scarier. It pulsed and flickered, shifting in and out of focus. We couldn't see any face, no features, but it moved with eerie purpose. I want to be absolutely clear about this. It wasn't just me hallucinating or seeing things. My friend saw it too. We were standing side by side, staring at the same apparition at the same time, and neither of us blinked. Neither of us doubted what we were seeing. Then, to our complete disbelief, it spoke not with words, but with